Hey, everybody, welcome to another edition of Practical Pet Business. We know you've got a lot on your plate. Thanks for spending some time with us talking about hopefully topics that resonate with you all. If you've got a topic you want Laura and I to hit on, please make sure you reach out to us. Send us an email, practicalpetchat@gmail.com, and we'll add it to our list of topics that we Rochambeau over to decide what gets into the episode. This one is going to be this one's going to be a little bit tougher, I think, for a lot of folks because you and I are hearing this more. And that is, should I consider moving away from my brick and mortar store and just going fully online or mobile? And I know we both have some pretty strong opinions on that. So, Lauren, I'll kick it to you first. What are your thoughts
Yeah.
in this day and age?
I see a lot of that right now because the economy is what it is, and there's a lot going on in the world right now that's making all retail difficult, not just the pet industry. But I'm torn on that because the pet industry is doing better than a lot of retail industries are doing. It's still growing. People are still spending money on their pets. The problem is that I think a lot of people get in with an idea and not a lot of homework.
Hmm.
And it always, whatever money you think it's going to take X times that. Um, you know, it it it's a difficult time, and I've read some things in some Facebook groups and stuff of people saying they're closing their stores after 5 years or however long, and they've lost their retirements, they're this far in, they've spent this much money, and they don't know what to do about it. They're angry that people are reacting like, oh my gosh, I can't believe you're closing down, and what a loss that will be. She goes, where are those customers? What they're shopping at big box stores or they're shopping online. And I get it. It's a really tough position to be in, but you don't get to that without a lot of things having taken place over that 5 years. So I think that better planning is necessary, better budgeting, more conservative outlay. Grandiose plans have to be done on an as you earn it type of thing. I know that through the pandemic, there were so many people who um, I thought it was only pandemic related, but it turned out not to be, that were month to month. And maybe they've owned their business for 10 years or 15 years. And still, it was a month to month thing. And, it was difficult every month to figure out who you were going to pay that month, and who you were going to order from because of that. Um, you have to look at that. If you're gonna be in a brick and mortar, how are you going to be different? What's going to set you apart? And if you're just going to be a brick and mortar that somebody can come in to buy something that they can get anywhere else, and that's all you're about, happy smiling faces and a place to ring people up, you won't sustain. It can't be sustained. You have to offer a variety of things. There has to be services involved. You have to be knowledgeable. You have to have the right staff. Everything is astronomical. I've seen both sides of I can't afford to pay for that level of employee, and I need employees, and employees are like, well, we deserve a living wage. Nobody's disputing that, but it's that give and take of what you can afford as an independent. And I don't think a lot of people spend time ahead of time projecting that, looking at what those projections are. And there's only so much of that you can do, right? Because none of us knew what was going to happen in the last couple of years with all of that. We came out of the
Right.
pandemic with everything being astronomically high and getting worse. It didn't go back, it just got worse. So I think it's difficult. But what was most concerning for me was finding out that, and it's been a number of people, they don't have their retirement anymore because they spent it. They're in debt by a couple 100,000 or more. And they don't know what they're going to do. They're trying to get out of the lease. There's just nothing but stress, stress, stress. And you got to pull the plug sooner than that. You can't wait till you're that far in. And pivot, you can't pivot when you get to that point. You can't then pivot to an online or something like that because now you're too far in, right? You don't have any more working capital, and it's too tough to pivot. So I think you have to be very involved and realistic at every step along the way. And if you're not pivoting along the way, if you're not adding additional services, if you're not looking for other revenue sources, then you need to either pull the plug or make your decision to become an online store, to become a mobile service, whatever it is that you're going to do, or just get out and go in a completely different direction. But all of those need their same due diligence type of digging
Yeah.
into before you do that. You just can't go pivot and go in a different direction. It's like, oh gosh, frying pan to the
Well,
fire.
yeah, you can do that. I'm not sure pivot, but I like that because you went upwards as if pivoting would give me an extra boost. But yeah, you can't pivot, make the same decisions on the same lack of info and expect different results. Because, yeah, I hear this even from vendors of, hey, I'm moving away from how I traditionally did it. And I have been on all sides of it and I see the value in all sides of it. There are some products that don't get the same benefit from having a store staff, from having, someone who can explain it, has the knowledge, etc. I can understand that if it's a tennis ball. Sure, the tennis ball is a tennis ball until it's not, and I need some education behind it. Um, But if you are a store today and you're pivoting to be online only, yeah, I mean, the reality is you think you've got big box store issues. You've got big box store issues in the online marketplaces that you can't just expect. And this is the heartbreaking thing when I'm having those conversations with people who are talking to me is like, yeah, I know my folks will follow me. And I'm like, oh, I hope so. But I'm not sure that's a given. Because once you shift to that, now you've added a whole other layer of dimension to, you know, there's some really big ones that are going to drop it at my doorstep. And
Mhm.
are you going to do that? And if you are, have you looked at those costs for that next day, same day, et cetera, delivery, what the costs are and all that? You may think your margins will improve. Typically, they don't, unless you're at a major scale. So I like what you said there is the pivot has to come well before that. And it does all go back to that planning and understanding, hey, who is our customer? Why are they coming here? How are we going to build that customer base? Because there are, in most of these situations, when I'll ask them, what's the population density in your area? You got to approach it the same way the big boxes do. They all look and they want X amount of people living in that area that meet this demographic. And I will tell you, I'm surprised how many folks can't even. And I'll say, well, when you started the business a couple of years ago, did you? Nah, we just knew. We saw a lot of folks at the dog park, and we just knew, we could be a good fit. I'm like, oh wow, okay, um, yeah. So I also think too, going back to planning for it. I think we have really hit a stage where it's very difficult to plan beyond, the next several months because we have just seen whether it's, pandemics, whether it's, increases in ingredients, tariffs on down the line. There are so many different impacts that can
Mhm.
pop up that you wouldn't have otherwise had on your radar
Right.
3 months ago, 4 months ago. Um, and I think that's another thing that has continued on, which has been very surprising to me. And it's not just again a pet thing, is there have been shortages of products.
Right.
And so, I one of the things that I'll hear from folks is, well, I'm going to carry more unique things. I'm going to carry more exotic things that really make me stand out. I love the thinking, but the execution is more likely to be that much more challenging because of that. And you see those fluctuations for a whole variety of reasons. And when I ask them, okay, that's great. You're going to build a section. You're going to have a row of, it's like, yeah, no, I'm going to, I've seen these things at the trade shows and I think it's going to make me stand out. I love a unique positioning, but also, hey, if we, had any of those requests from our customers, you've got some good customers that you can have these conversations with and say, hey, I'm thinking about bringing in this line. You know, there's just got to be more planning, more wider approach. And unfortunately, you have to be more flexible than you've ever been. That doesn't mean pivot out, though, and over to another potential mistake.
No, you know what I think though too is 2020 hindsight, of course, having had a store for almost 20 years and being in the industry for this long, 25 years, you learn how to read the tea leaves, right? And the tea leaves for me was always to look at the suppliers
Mhm.
because I'm almost like a consumer, right? I'm buying the supplies, which my
Yep.
consumers are going to buy from me, but I'm almost, I'm second to last in that chain. So it's manufacturer to distributor, distributor to the store, from the store to the consumer. I started to get bad feelings about this when we came out of the pandemic and you saw so many distributors not be able to get products for a long time.
Yep.
Manufacturers weren't able to produce for whatever reasons, shortages of cans or packaging or ingredients. They're start everybody's purse strings started to get tight, and where manufacturers granted lots of grace to distributors to have oodles and oodles of product on this distributor floor, not paid for, because again, reading the tea leaves, oodles and oodles of product were going to be transferred into the stores. Everything became a stopgap, right? And it started with when I realized that manufacturers were starting to call in their chips from distributors and saying, we're not going to send you any more product till you pay for the last product.
Yep.
And then distributors went, oh crap. They started going to the stores and saying, I really need you to pay your bill, and that grace period got tighter and tighter. And all of that happened sort of simultaneously. Well, when you sit back and you look at that, that's a bad sign. You knew it was coming. And sure enough, you saw a major distributor go down. A couple other distributors are struggling
Yeah.
to work with the manufacturers, manage that much of a float of product that's not paid for, because they're working both ends of it. They're working the manufacturer, they're working the retail stores. The retail stores are in a little bit of panic because, they got to pay for product to get the product. Consumers have a billion choices. It's this whole domino effect. And when I looked at the suppliers and I realized what was going on, I was like, this is a bad indicator. This is problematic. And that right there should have created a lot of tightening of purse strings at the retail level. Maybe you don't have five or six deep, of something. You have two. And or you do things that you don't sell a lot of and order only. You pare down your variety to your major sellers to just keep that going. The things that that you can get on a continual basis. There's a lot of ways, when you pivot, you don't have to pivot out of something, but you have to pivot internally to read the tea leaves and understand there's something happening that is going to catch up to everybody. And the suppliers are everything. Manufacturers, distributors, they're everything to the existence of the pet store.
Yeah.
So,
I think that you just hit on something really important. I want to extend it, and that's the indicators. I think indicators are everywhere now. I think data has become so much more important. And one thing that I see continually, manufacturers, stores, is they have they have been able to operate on feeling and well, yeah, it's going good. Now more than ever, you've got to really be diving deeper into that data and extracting not what you're feeling, maybe not even what you think you're seeing. Here's those hard numbers,
Right.
because those indicators too, the one that is a little, disappointing and shocking to me is I'll hear from folks, well, this was a bestseller last year, and this year I can't move it. I can't even give it away. And it's like, okay, it just went from selling gangbusters to zero overnight. Well, we saw a tail off and this and that. But to your point, they kept stocking at a level of it's going to go back to gangbusters.
Mhm.
You can't do that anymore. And I love that notion, but here's the other thing too. Remember, we used to have regional distributors that the time to get the product was not as concerning as it is today for some folks as well. Because I could call up, a store could call us as a vendor, and I'd be like, oh, we've got, two distributors in that area that could get it to you today or tomorrow, and not cost you an arm and a leg like some of it will happen today. And I think that losing some of that regionality. I know there are the big bulk warehouses in certain regions now, and but that comes at such a cost.
Mhm.
And the minimum orders that are, tied to that as well. I
Oh,
think
and the
that's,
delivery fees. The
yeah,
delivery fees are outrageous.
yeah, it's all put more pressure. And again, it didn't happen overnight. And I'm not sure that everybody was watching that and really
Right.
understanding the impact, because it wasn't just one or two products. It was, you know, a majority of their products have seen increases in price, delivery fees, and oh, by the way, Rob, the packaging, um, you know, now is smaller and the product is less ounces, less this, less that. And I'm like,
Right.
those are indicators. Those are indicators.
Right.
And your folks, they were buying, the big size. Now they don't buy the big size. They're buying, that small or whatever they need. Um, it's interesting. I have seen vendors shifting around, and some of the vendors I work with had these, trial packs and starter packs and all the rest of that they talk about. And one of those indicators for me was when that became one of their top selling products across their categories. I was like, that's telling you the value of what you have has become very transactional, because the folks aren't willing to invest where they could save some money and buy the bigger amount. They're only using it now as needed by them, and that's whether it's treats and all the rest of this stuff. So use that data, and know that every interaction, just like we say in training, when does training with your pets happen? Any moment you're with them. When does training for you in your store and data gathering happen? Any moment that store is open is now a data point that you've got to be diving deeper into, so that you can avoid these, situations that you and I are, heartbroken over.
Well, those little regional distributors, unfortunately, there's not so many choices anymore. A lot of them
Right.
have either shut down or been sold,
Yeah.
gobbled up by the bigger people. None of that is a good thing. The having fewer options is not good for the brand. It's not good for the retailer. It's not good for the consumer. The only one it's good for is distributors. But, distributors are trying to hang on as well. And they're doing that by trying to eliminate some of the competition. So it's a very tenuous situation, I think, um, for retail pet, um, for what people are doing, the directions they're going to go in, the choices they're going to make. And I think having a much more cautious, conservative view of your business. And I love the data thing that you bring up because you gotta look at that every day.
Yep.
I mean, maybe you can skip a day, but really you need to be looking at that frequently, if not every day, just about, and get a real feel. And if you're not in your store, it makes it much harder because then you're only looking at numbers. You're not going to see things coming. You're only seeing what happened right then. When
Right.
you're in your store, you hear the conversations, you see that what's happening, customers approach you, they ask you things that give you, tea leaves, indicators that give you all of those um oh, things that you should pay attention to because maybe I won't stock up quite as much in that. Somebody is like, it's just things are getting so tight, don't you think? And maybe that's all they say. Things are so expensive nowadays. That right there, if that's the only thing that customer says, I promise you they're feeling it and worrying about it 100 times over internally. And that little tiny blip just popped out. It's really something if, one customer says that, 10 years ago, that would have meant nothing. Okay, how can I help you, Mr. Customer? You've got a lot of customers feeling that way now. We're all feeling that. It's ridiculous to buy anything nowadays, not just for our pets, but anything. And when you're running a business, the best thing you can do is it's a hard decision. We get into owning pet stores because we love it. We love animals and we want to help people, but you can't lose everything you have and have no other option but to close and just figure out the rest of your life how you're going to, survive. You can't wait that long. Live another day, live to fight another day.
Yeah. And on that note, there are plenty of good things still happening in the pet world for pet shop owners, and you independents are the backbone. You'll continue to be the backbone as long as you are making a difference. And I just want to end the data can help give you indicators of where can I make a difference? Because if what I'm doing right now isn't making a difference or the difference I think it's making, then I need to adjust and get in here. And that's different than a pivot. Pivot is a big shift. An adjustment is sometimes it's just a little tweaking. And I like what you just said, where it's like, hey, I'm hearing what you're saying. How can I help you? As I hear that more often, it's not just how can I help you? That may be what you're saying to your customer, but you should be saying in the back of your mind, because it's going to help me. And I'm going to be here for a longer time to serve what I'm so passionate about.
Right.
And so there are still plenty of positives out there. We want you all to be positive. We want you to succeed, which is why we have these difficult conversations. But let us know how you're handling all this. We know these are challenging times. Send us an email, practicalpetchat@gmail.com. Reach out to us on all the social media networks. Share us with other folks out there so that they know they're not alone. And we just, hang in there. We've got faith in you. What you do makes a difference. For all those who haven't said this week, thank you for being there. Let Lorin and I say that. Thank you for being there.
Absolutely.
It makes a difference. You make a difference. So thanks again. We'll see you next week on Practical Pet Business.
Thanks, guys.
The content of this podcast is for informational purposes only. It is not intended as, nor should it be construed as, professional medical advice, diagnosis, or treatment for your pets. Always seek the advice of a qualified veterinarian with any questions you may have regarding your pet's health or medical condition. Never disregard professional veterinary advice or delay in seeking it because of something you have heard on this podcast. The hosts and the guests of this podcast are not liable for any actions taken based on the information shared during these episodes. Any reliance on the information provided is solely at your own risk. Copyright 2025 Practical Pet Chat, all rights reserved. Unauthorized duplication, distribution, or reproduction of any content from this podcast, including but not limited to audio, scripts, and show notes, is prohibited without prior written consent. The opinions and views expressed by the host and guests are their own and do not necessarily reflect the views of Practical Pet Chat.